Now you're asking me about famines and fires and whether climate change can cause famines and fires. Well, fires, of course, you know what that is. Famine, what's the difference between a drought and a famine? Famine is a lack of food so great that people are in danger of starving and, in fact, dying. It's been known for long, since the colonial times when the British went around colonizing places like India, where they took out all the good crops to themselves, whether it's cotton or wheat or whatever else, and left the poor people to starve. So famine is often human made. Rainfall can reduce food production, but usually famine to the level of the danger of dying is related to how the food is getting distributed. In the African countries of Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, and Ethiopia, you can find out where they are. They are all mostly in Eastern Africa. Uh, Here, famine goes hand in hand with droughts, which means every time they have a drought, which is, let's say, a natural phenomenon or is getting exacerbated by climate change, as we saw in the last chapter. But drought doesn't have to lead to famines unless there is no planning for getting food from elsewhere or distributing it within the country, where there are entire countries not necessarily in a drought, other than maybe Djibouti is a very small place and maybe it can be entirely under a drought. So generally the region has two rainy seasons in East Africa. One is called a short rain and one is called a long rain. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But when the rains don't come, drought follows. In 2011, the region was hit by the worst drought in 6 decades, over half a century. Okay, even in droughts, there are many types of droughts that you can follow up if you want on my other podcasts. Soils became sandy, plants wilted, which means they lost all the water and became very dry and unproductive. Farming was impossible because there was no water. Food was scarce everywhere. Many families herded animals for a living, so whatever little grass was there, they used it for grazing the animals and got milk and meat to survive. But the herds, like farmers, were also in trouble. Without food or water, the animals were dying as well. In Somalia and other countries, thousands of families left their homes in search of water. Imagine how bad the situation is, that they cannot even continue to stay on. They have to move to find water. And this has happened throughout our evolution. I don't want to get too far, but as we evolved over the last, let's say, couple of million years ago, especially over the last 70,000 years or so, climate kept changing naturally at the time because we were in a small number and were not making such a big change. But natural climate change left us very vulnerable to fires and food supply and droughts and famines, and we migrated and we colonized the whole world, often in search of food and water. Right? So in Somalia and other countries, thousands of families left their homes in search of water. They traveled hundreds of miles. Some families made their way to refugee camps in northern Kenya, crowded spaces filled with others who were in similar need. And you can see a sketch of camp for refugees where tents were provided and some supplies were provided thanks to international aid and the country's planning to seek aid and get food and feed the people who were in need. Okay, some families split up because entire family couldn't travel together. They decided one group goes this way, another group this way, and so on. Outside the city of Garissa, Kenya, mothers with young children stayed in poor villages gathering wood to sell for pennies. Pennies, depending on where you're from, that is a very small amount of money. Fathers kept walking with their herds trying to find water. They had plans to come back to the family and bring something with them, but no one had enough to eat even as they kept wandering around. In July 2011, the United Nations declared a famine in Somalia. Between 2010 and 2012, about 260,000 people died, half of them young children. That's heart-wrenching. Just 5 years later, Somalia faced drought and famine conditions again. In the past, it was one big drought every 10 years, said director at World Vision, an organization that aids children and families. He said then it came to one drought every 5 years, and now the trends are showing that it will be one every 3 to 5 years. We're in a crisis. In the heat wave discussion, we said the duration, the intensity, and the frequency and the scale of the heat waves are changing because of climate change, and here we are saying again the frequency of the droughts are increasing. These are called return periods. When it used to happen every 10 years, the return period is called 10 years, once in 10 years, but then it became once in 5 years, so the return period became almost half, and then it became 2 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So you see how the climate change begins to amplify the changes that naturally happen. This region has 2 rainy seasons, and if one of the rainy seasons fails because of natural causes, they can have a drought. But that could typically happen once in 10 years before, but with so much greenhouse gases, climate change, warming, now they're happening once in 3 to 5 years. Okay, climate change may not be causing every crisis, but it makes conditions more extreme. So even a drought that occurs naturally in a warmer temperatures desiccates or dries up the soils faster, kills the crops faster, and water disappears faster. Right? In dry areas, droughts and famines are more likely to happen, and in the American West, where there are vast forests, drought leads to different kinds of disaster altogether, and those are wildfires. Fires that get started because of lightning, because the vegetation is dry, because of the warming and the vapor being taken out of the plants and so on, and then a natural spark can set off this wildfire that spreads very rapidly. Also, there are human causes involved because humans try to manage the fires by taking out certain parts of the forest to make it burn less, but there is some evidence that such fire management, as it's called, can actually make some fires worse. Okay, so warming climate means shorter winters and longer, hotter summers. So winter arrives late and ends early, and during those long hot summers, trees dry out like kindling. They catch fire quickly. It's like dried firewood that's just ready to light up as soon as there's a little spark. And fires spread faster because there's more and more of the dry vegetation. Each year, raging wildfires sweep across the states from California to Colorado, even in Canada, and some parts of Europe burned up last year in 2023. They start in forests, maybe from a lightning strike or a campfire that people were not careful about. Flames leap up from tree to tree, shrub to shrub, jumping to grassy fields, closer and closer to communities because we are moving closer and closer to woods and natural vegetation because it's fun to live near forests, right? Wildfire season used to last just 5 months in the US. Now it can last more than 7 months. Outbreaks have doubled and tripled. The times when fires just break out are called outbreaks. They have doubled or tripled because again of mostly warming and drying, and also because of human activities like living close to fires, having campfires and so on. In October 2017, California experienced its deadliest week for wildfires in state history. More than 40 people died. But this book is old, and if you look at later data, you'll find probably that there were more deadly fires more recently and so on. As Mark Cochrane, a scientist from South Dakota State University, explained, South Dakota is again a northern state in the US close to the border of Canada. Ecosystems are designed to withstand the normal climate situations, he said, but he went on, we suspect that things aren't normal anymore. There is California with the Pacific Ocean over here, and its borders a long state, very rich state, generally a dry state because this is cold water. And remember, where there is cold water, there is usually no rising air and rainfall and so on, so it's a drier region. And now the population has grown, and because it's rich, people are living on mountain slopes, in forests, in woods and close to woods, and so on and so forth. Okay, so bark beetles are one of the things. As temperatures change and they get warmer and the winter shrinks, mosquitoes and other insects that die in very cold frosty days don't die anymore, so their number grows and grows. Higher temperatures bring a beetle boom to forests. Bark beetles live inside trees, blocking water from traveling to the branches, so they begin to eat away the trees. They're like the cancer that affects our body. The trees dry out and die, becoming fire hazards and sending more CO2 into the air. Photosynthesis decreases, CO2 doesn't go into the trees. Trees dry up and burn up, and all the CO2 that was there is also released. And here is an image that shows how these bark beetles and other kinds of beetles are being very, very harmful to large scale fires, even in cold climates of Canada and so on, Asian beetles and so on. And these beetles are traveling wide and far because they can get on a ship, they can get in a package that is being shipped by Amazon from here to there, or you are shipping from here to there to your cousin or your friend, and so on and so forth. So mosquitoes and insects and beetles can travel and find new homes and create new damages in new places, and the entire world begins to suffer. Okay, so these are the famines and fires that we have to worry about, and people are studying whether famines are becoming more frequent, more harsh on people, and whether wildfires are becoming more in number, larger in area, and more intense in terms of the heat they produce and how they can change the local weather. If so much heat is released by the fires, they can begin to change the winds and make the fire spread faster and burn faster, so on and so forth. Okay, don't get scared. Learn about them in your neighborhood. If you're too close to fire, and your parents probably know that they are, and they know what to do, they watch out for weather forecasts, warnings from the government, and they keep watching where the fires are and so on. So the idea is not to get scared, but to learn and become aware and be careful as well. Okay, and then think as you grow up, what can you do for your own future, because old people like me have altered your present and your future. Okay, so see you in the next chapter.